what have you done for me lately? It's coons, what have y'all done for us lately? And if there's no answer, the only thing we owe them.
Hey, good evening. It's Tuesday night. Every Tuesday night, we know on Let's Talk 2, we're going to have Sister Azima here. And we welcome a very interesting show tonight in reference to this is the third part, excuse me. This is the third part to our discussion on fascism, the isms, Marxism, communism, and getting a better understanding. And it really brings about a long conversation that we even had on the issue of the Constitution, original law, common law, and getting us to understand what is going on and understanding how to interpret the law to laymen. Because one thing, and I had to get this reminded today before we introduced Sister Azima, I got a reminder from a very good friend of mine, and we were talking about law, and she said something very interesting. She said, what most people don't understand is that the Constitution was written for everyone to understand. And some of the issues that come from that is you get interpretation of the Constitution by so many people, jurists, and so forth and so on. So me and her were having a conversation about the Constitution. But anyway, Sister Azima's here. Good evening, young lady.
Good evening, everybody. I'm hoping you're having a good day.
Yeah. You asked me, was the weather a little crazy? Not yet, but it's going to be very interesting Thursday in my area. I know Jamaica is getting pounded by the hurricane. And one thing I just want to say before we begin, Sister Azima, another thing, right, is family, friends, people that tune in, don't play with the weather. It's nothing to be playing with. I know that these weather young ladies, they make a lot of mistakes based off of, the satellite. That's human to make those mistakes. However, when they tell you something about the weather, take your precautions because the weather is very, very unforgiving. The type of job that I work at is I work basically in disaster areas. And I see some very wicked stuff in areas that you may just hear it's high winds, but you get a 45-mile-per-hour wind in a valley, those winds can be deadly. So just, when you living in the area and they tell you about bad weather, please just take your precautions. Flooding, water has to find a place. So just take your precautions. But anyway, Sister Azim, glad to see you this Tuesday evening.
How are you all? I'm going to parrot on what you're saying. After I left NASA, I worked for Red Cross, blood banking. But even with blood banking, we still had to be out in severe weather. And it's no joke. It's just you and the elements. It's not like you in a building or around a bunch of people. It's you and the people in that van and the elements. And please take that seriously. And I'm going to encourage everybody to have an emergency pack in your car. blankets, flares, flashlights, extra batteries, jumper cables, a shovel that also allows you to cut and chop, or having an axe. Also put in dry goods, things that you can eat on the fly, protein bars and all that kind of stuff, and even dried fruits that already packaged in case you have to be out and you have the ability to feed yourself. The more heat food you put in your body, it'll create heat and it'll keep you warm. So yeah, dry socks, preferably wool, not cotton, and have some other type of blanket made of wool. Wool can get wet, but it won't cling to the body, and it will dry rapidly, allowing you to keep heat. Okay, so yeah, please do those things. It's important. You can put them all in a bag, a backpack, or whatever, but put it in the trunk of your car. Always, always have that. Okay, we're on isms. Remember when I told you what isms are? Methodologies created to control how people think, how they function, best way to control societies, mostly societies in cities or urban areas. It doesn't work too well in rural areas because the number of people is spread out. Many of the rural areas, they're mostly farmers. So you don't have the same density of population. Therefore, the programming can't just easily translate or transmute to other people. So isms work best in what we call urban or city areas because of the high density of population and the fact that everybody is seeing whatever it is you're promoting through propaganda or however, and they're able to reinforce it. Even if everybody doesn't believe, the reinforcement is there. And so you will act accordingly, if nothing else. So last time we talked about fascism, and we talked about Mussolini and Stalin and all of that. We just briefly went over 'em. But what is communism? And communism, not the communism, modern day communism under Karl Marx or Thomas Ingalls, but the communism, if you break it down, it's community. And so when you have a community based mindset, everybody shares everything. In that community based mindset, I don't own the land that I live on or farm. The land belongs to everybody, but out of respect for each other, we allow you to have your 5 acres or your 20 acres to do what you need to do because you're farming to feed everybody in that society. And so it's an ancient thing. They're going to say the Greeks were the ones that did it, but remember, everything the Greeks learned came from Kemet, okay, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Mali, um, what we now called the Dominic Congo, Democratic Congo, and areas south in South Africa from Mozambique and Zimbabwe and those areas. Those people were here. We were here, scattered out across that particular continent. And we had a communal mindset. We went from being clan driven to community driven because we became more um, agrarian or agricultural based um, societies. Therefore, we didn't feel it was necessary to say, oh, that's mine. Oh, this is mine. This individualism that you see now is it's new, it's recent, within the last 5,000 years. And I know to you that's like, oh, but not really. In the last 5,000 years, we've come up on this individual mindset. Prior to that, we shared it, equally. So you didn't have like we have now this hierarchy of these are the aristocrats, and these people over here can be royals, and you make your actors and movie stars, people in entertainment, and your sports people the pinnacle of what you want to consider in your society, and everybody looks up to them. But many of them are just like the guy down the street around the corner. They come with a history of problems, but because we have technology, we can erase that. We can smooth it over, unless there are people that really interfere with certain structures and the entertainment hierarchy. Therefore, if you're at the bottom of that, they'll talk bad about you. They'll make fun of you. They'll just put all of your personal business out there in the news media, and then everybody can look down on you. But the purpose of communism in its purest form was that we were a community that came together to protect the elderly, the infirmed, those that were not able to take care of themselves, and build a strong infrastructure to educate, take care of the health, not control the land, but work with the land in order to feed yourself, and to set up walls or boundaries to keep strangers and other creatures out, so that you don't have to worry about animals coming in and snatching you up in the middle of the night while you're sleeping. So that was the root cause of that. Now, as time went on and we got to the European structure, everything changed. Okay. And that change came about during the Renaissance period in the 17th century. There was a book written by a man named Thomas More, More, not Moor. Um, the book was called Utopia. And in that, he was trying to convince mostly the white Europeans that you didn't need to own anything. You don't have to do anything but work hard and give what you have to um, the elites. And this is where your hierarchy came in. And now that you're giving everything to the elites, what does it do? It enslaves you to a mindset that you can never be ahead. And I remember telling you all maybe 2 or 3 sessions back that these white people came, they were living in abject poverty. Abject. It was not uncommon to see their children. And now, when I say children, I don't mean a 5, 6, 7 year old. Some of them were babies. These people would throw their babies out. Okay, so they lived in such abject poverty that to have anything, it's like feeding a person that's been systemically starving. And the first time they get a chance to really eat, they're like a bull in a china shop, where their eyes are so big that they eat more than their stomach can hold, because they've never had it. And so now all of a sudden you have rights. You have the ability to have land, even if it's just a little smidget of land, or you have the right to own something. Okay. And so they became very aggressive and hostile. You're going to deny me this? I've been denied all along. It's the same thing when our people came out of slavery, those that were enslaved. Once they got out and they realized they had freedom, they did everything. They went to school, they learned to trade, they did whatever they needed to do, and they would fight you tooth and nail, and ingrain that in their children to fight you tooth and nail, because you have denied me so much. So what came out of that when we hit um, 20th century, or the early 1900s. In 1917, on the heels of the Bolshevik Wars, remember I told you the Europeans were fighting because all of them were cousins, they were related. And that in-house fighting was a nightmare. So on the heels of 1917, okay, right after the in America, we had our first stock market, well, the second stock market crash. You had the first one in the 1800s, late 1800s, and then you had the second one in the 1913s, that time period, along with 1933. What happened was that when Russia was devastated behind the Bolshevik Wars, they realized we've got to do something different. We've got to do something better. And with that came communism. So what they did was that they took a pluralistic view of how to have community living and then inserted capitalism and the royal hierarchy of people in order to control the masses. And education, remember now, a lot of white people could not read or write. That was not uncommon. That was commonplace for them not to be able to read or write. They were illiterate. And then on top of that, some of them were totally uneducated, even though they may have money. If you were a female or you happened to be the son of a drunkard, they wouldn't allow you to get the education. Females weren't given education. They were given, they were taught how to serve their master, which would be their fathers, their brothers, their cousins, or their husband. And they also had to learn how to handle the staff, um, learn music. You're going to be this delicate flower that doesn't have the ability to think. And if you show any initiative towards thinking, then you could be hauled off, put into jail for those things. And so at the end of the Bolshevik Wars, where the females had just as much say in what was going on with the males, they knew too, even though their primary thing was trying to protect the children that they themselves gave birth to, and then all of the cousins that are around them. Those women knew how to fight, how to sword fight, and all this kind of stuff. But the minute they killed them off, the the patrilineal society, mostly from the church, because the church never wanted the masses to be educated, because it would go against the church and the um, the royal house. That meant that the church could no longer have say in the politics that went on because the people were questioning. They weren't so much worried about the men as they were about the women questioning what was going on, because the women were required to go to the churches. And you saw the decimation. Remember, Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? Okay, you have to go back and learn that. It says with silver bells and cockle shells. Well, the silver bells were the heads of the females.
Hmm.
Okay, next to the flowers known as the silver bells, so you couldn't smell the stench from that. And that was under Henry VIII. Okay, so you need to look at that. So now you're moving forward from that. On the heels of that came our very illustrious person known as Karl Marx. And Karl Marx gave us something very interesting. Okay. He published the Communist Manifesto with Frederick Engels in 1848. And the purpose of that manifesto was that it became the foundational text that critiqued capitalism and called for a revolution by the working class to establish a classless society. So, what really happened was that the politics fell to the working class. The working class organized so well that they could control the politics. But the people who implemented the policies, okay, sat at the head of, in their case, the three most important positions. We say for us, it's, the legislative and the judicial and the executive. For them, it was the royal house, the church, and the knights and bishops, your chessboard. And so, with that, they have the ability to determine who lived or died. If a lot of people began to follow a particular queen that they loved, they would kill her in her early stages. If they couldn't kill her outright because they knew the people would riot and take over, then they would force her into servitude of having children. They would get her pregnant, whether it's from her father, her uncle, a cousin, and she could die in childbearing years, which will allow them to the patrilineal aspect to take over the communism, and it became capitalism, okay, with a fascist overtone. So it no longer becomes the needs of the people, it becomes the needs of the capitalist, the church, the royal houses, and the knights and bishops, okay, the Lord's court. And with that, this is where you had the armies that would stump down the people. They would ride through the little townships and villages and things of this nature, and they would decimate them. And they would bring about poverty. They would burn their fields. They would take their children. If the boys were at least 9 years old and older, they would make them slaves to the field or to the mines, or they would turn them into soldiers, whether they liked it or not. Kind of like what was happening in certain parts of Africa, where they were taking the young boys and turning them into soldiers, very violent soldiers. And this is what you see here. The whole purpose of communism was to allow the capitalists, the people who were willing to put the money up to support the church and the crown, to have complete control over what was given to the masses of people. So, like, if we have a major drought in America, the United States of America, we do have enough independent farmers that you can buy food from them. If you were in some of these communist countries after Karl Marx and Engels, Frederick Engels, then they could go and shut down the farms and make sure that only a certain amount of the farms would produce, and that money or those crops would go to the royal house, the priesthood, okay, and the lords in waiting. Okay, those are your bishops and your knights, and everybody else would struggle the best way you could.
I
And it
find it
was
interesting, Azima, as you were discussing the history and explaining, right, that when you got to Karl Marx, we both chuckled, right, and understanding the similarity that him and Mussolini both had, how fascism and communism, they basically are, in essence, they appear to be the same thing, but one says for the people, one says for a dictatorship, but
Mhm,
the means how they control appears to be the same thing.
mhm,
And also with these two gentlemen, Marx and Mussolini,
mhm.
both of them were journalists.
Yes, all
They were
in
pro-
every ism, the people are journalists because you
this is
have
how,
to have a way
right?
to create propaganda for your people. Okay. And if you know that the masses of your people can't read, then what do? You draw pictures, and the pictures are going to convey what you want them to convey. Okay. We see it here. What comes out when we hear about EBT, SNAP, and all that? Who do we think is on it? You think every black person that's out here is on
They'll
welfare?
show, they'll give us an imagery of somebody
Right,
struggling, looking like they're homeless, destitute,
right.
looking
Okay.
like they're going.
And
They
they
show
always show us,
people
right?
going to pantries or whatever.
But when you go and look at the statistics, 43 to 49% of people on EBT or SNAP benefits are white. That's half your population. The next largest group under them are your Hispanics. And guess who's at the bottom? We. Okay. Underneath us is Asians, Polynesians, people from the Asiatic realm, and from North Africa, Central Africa. So, if so, that is what they do. These isms have to propagate the lie in order to be in control, and they have to give you the illusion that their political system. Remember, political system is nothing more than policies. You can have a club and develop policies. You can have the Thomas Crown Club, and you all sit down and write up your policies, your rules and regulations, and you enforce them only in that club. But let's say that club wants to be bigger. So now you're going to go out and you're going to hobnob with people that have similar viewpoints as you, and you're going to introduce your club, and you're going to get them to participate because you're going to give them some type of strategic benefit. And then before you know it, it's only in cities. This works real well in city states. Okay. Then you can infect people with the rules of your club. And that is what these isms did. And then when they wanted to really enforce it in the rural areas, they sent their armies out to destroy the lands that the people were living in. And don't think America didn't do it, because America did. They bombed black neighborhoods in 1985 under the move moment. And so we know what America will do. And this was no different. They were following what they had seen from the royal families in Europe. And the royal families were petty. They were hateful of each other. There was a lot of inbreeding. And so you had a lot of problems going on there. And so if you want to define yourself from someone different, you would have an ism: fascism, communism, okay, Taoism, whatever. It can be pure in its essence of creation, but once it got into the hands of the royal families and the priesthood, then it became a weapon. So then Karl Marx came with that. And this became the model, him and Frederick Engels. This became the model. They started that war, World War One. By the time we got to World War Two, communism was full swing, with it impacting who? The greatest, the Soviet Union. And then it spread around after World War II. It was heading into China, but not as communism, but as Taoism under Mao Zedong. And he was brutal, just like Idi Amin was brutal. Okay. And when you look at it, brutality was the name of the game. Even
So
with
that's
Leopold. Uh-huh.
that's literally when you look at it. For anybody that tries to understand the ideology, the only way historically, what you're saying, the only way that it can stay in tow is it has to use brutality as a way of keeping people in line.
Right, because no free thought, Free thought is the enemy of any type of ism. When you have free thought, it means that you can look at a problem and go like, that's not a problem to me, but maybe I have a solution because it's a problem to you too. That's not what they only wanted white, wealthy men, okay, to be in control. Two categories, white and wealthy.
So this in essence, this creates what we talk about, what most people are hearing nowadays that's always been around. This creates oligarchs.
Yes, yes. And so
Interesting.
when you create a structure like that, which is very patrilineal, it pulls you away from the whole of you. You are a whole person when you're able to collectively understand that it takes both masculine energy and feminine energy to make you whole. So what they do, they segregate that. I don't know any society that elevates their women. America has done better, but not many countries. I can't think of it. Because in India, you can still be stoned. And there are still countries in, where the Taliban are that you can be stoned. And women, even now when we see the young black men and the young black females arguing about the fact that no woman can raise a man. Okay, I'm not going to get into that whole debate, but here's what you need to understand: go out and look at your statistics, because they're going to tell you it's terrible with a woman. But go look at the statistics, and what we have found is that any single head of household, whether it's a father raising the children or the mother raising the children, you're going to have major social issues because you only have one person there who cannot attend to all of the needs because they have to work. And that disconnect where the child has to come home and be on their own, not by choice, okay, creates that disconnect. So, therefore, single parenthood is a very difficult, challenging place to be if you do not have other support systems in place through family, through close friends, or whatever. And it angers me, not angers me, but it really makes me take pause when I hear them complain, oh, the woman can't do it. But she's the one that gave birth to you. Okay. And the father is the one that gives you the foundation. So anytime you have one or the other being a single parent, you're going to have these issues. And the statistics show it that in single parent households, the children are 44% more likely to act up whether they are a single parent father or a single parent mother.
Man, it's just sounds deep. We conversate a lot. You just speaking on some things I didn't know you had this information up there.
But yeah,
I know you.
because I do my research. That's one thing I'll say. I'll do my research. And for a while last year, that was a hot topic where everybody was
So
saying, this, that, and the
yeah,
other.
and we can definitely speak to
Mhm,
that, right?
mhm. But what I'm trying to say is that with all of that, that is how you get to have these isms, because the isms separate you. It'll separate families. It'll separate friendships. Because right now, people are people will turn other folks in so they can get a reward. Oh, I know somebody that needs to be deported. We've seen that action. We saw it during slavery. Oh, there's a black person over there, and you're not even a slave. You might be an indigenous Indian, and you're not a slave. But they know how to milk the system to get the benefits that they want. And that's what the problem does. Isms creates segregation. whether it's communism or whatever. So here are the people under communism thinking they're doing great work for the people. That was what was happening with Germany. Germany had been in the First War. They had been part of the Bolshevik War. Okay, they were hurting. Their lands were decimated. Bombs were everywhere. Dead bodies that they couldn't really bury. So when your country is decimated like that, you need a leader who's going to come along and not only give you a boost and hope, but you're going to bring some type of system into play. And we're going to call it the people's system. That's what communism was. Because Nazi is an acronym for the National Alliance or Association of Zionist Beliefs. And then you just take out all the other words and you get this acronym, NAZI. And so, um, with that, they were bringing about the fact that if you unify all of Germany, because I think Germany was broken up into three parts, if you unify all of Germany, it will benefit the masses of people. And the people really believed in it because what they gave us the Volkswagen, the people's car, they gave us these new refrigerators that were just so, they would last 30, 40 years. I mean, the technology that went into it was just very interesting. It was overwhelming. They were very proud of themselves. But what happens is that the people under him, not that Adolf wasn't what he was, but the people under him massaged him in such a manner. He was like, hey, I'm going for the gusto. And then it went from being for the people to him incarcerating his people and telling you that if you really want to be a German, you had to be, what did he say? Blonde haired, blue eye, and at least 5'9". And if you look at Hitler, you look at Joseph Stalin, you look at Karl Marx, they are short, dark haired, dark eyed. Some of them got olive toned skin, and I laugh. Adolf's mother was Jewish. So I'm laughing. I'm like, really? Mm. Okay. So, but that is what you do. That's what isms do. They separate you and they segregate you. And when you do that, you buy into the political mess that goes on. And the propaganda goes on forever. You see it with what's my guy, Kim Jong Un. Look at him, what he's doing to his people. Many of them starve. He doesn't care as long as he has his way. It's being in control, not necessarily in control of your physical self. That's part of it. But it's also being in control of your mental ability, your intellect. Nothing that you do benefits you. It has to benefit the whole. Okay. And the only people who are really receiving benefit are those who are the oligarchy or the aristocrats or the royals, the hierarchy of the church, and then the courtship around the kings of the oligarchs, your bishops, your knights, in this case, your politicians and your congressmen and senators and all that kind of thing. Those are the ones who are receiving great benefit. The laws bend for them. They don't bend for you. And so what you end up is poverty. So in 1980, the 80s, Russia was struggling. And those people were barely able to get any food. Same thing with Cuba. The people weren't able to get a lot of food there. Even though they were growing their own food, the islands are the hardest place for people to survive, but the greatest place for isms to be there, fascism, communism, all of that, because the island is small enough to be ruled. And those people who don't want to starve, they're going to go against their own people under the guise of the kingship. And so you see that, people in long lines. And when they get there, if you're lucky to get a half a loaf of bread that day, and I'm not being cynical, you were lucky to get that. If you were
Hmm.
able to get any vegetable. I'm not even talking about fruit, okay, or any livestock that you butchered to be able to feed your family. It was just a miracle. But when you're constantly fighting on your land and you destroy your land, it takes land 7 years to regain its ability to grow crops. And if you're blowing it up, tearing it up, you don't have a way to grow any of those crops.
So let me ask you, Sister Azim, fascism and communism, they're so similar because you need the chaos, you need nationalism, you need fear. So when you hear the rhetoric, and I'm quite sure you heard it all throughout your life with certain people would say McCarthyism, stuff like that. When you hear the rhetoric being spewed like it's common, more common now than even when I was a kid, but you've heard it a long time in your life. What do you say when you hear people call other people these words? Definitely our political apparatus.
What, that they're communistic?
Yeah.
It's a joke because they really don't know. Our No Child Left Behind is a form of fascism and communism to me, because you wrote into the bill that you only wanted children to be educated to the 10th grade level of comprehension. I didn't say not to educate them, but you can only educate them to the 10th grade level of comprehension. So anything above that, they act scattered brain. I have, when I grew up, you brought your books home and you studied with those books and you wrote your questions down. They don't send homework home. They don't send it. If you don't do it in your study hall and class, they just pass you on.
Yeah, they basically teach you tests now instead of teaching you to critically think.
Right, but not only that, when you allow businesses and corporations into your school system, what are they looking for? They're looking for
And
able-bodied people to work. They're not looking for someone to create a union. They're not looking for someone to be able to rationalize that that machine is not safe. They're not looking for someone to teach you how to go over there and use certain things properly. Okay? Because the company can deny everything. And if you get hurt on the job, you're just SOL. So it it is a system that's in place. The isms are still here. It just changes the first part of the name. So an ism is a way you can have total control over the mindset of a large majority of your people, especially in urban areas or cities.
so let me ask you, throughout history, definitely American history, and I wish I would have had it because I wasn't prepared to ask you this question. When you and I'm quite sure you heard this speech that Kennedy made before he got killed when he talked about a free, open society,
Mm-hmm.
that you shouldn't have a secret government in the shadows.
Oh
You
yeah.
know exactly what I'm talking about.
Uh-huh.
He spoke about that is the true essence of what he interpreted the Constitution is supposed to be for its members, so to say,
Right.
and how having these secret societies and were basically a form of ism of control.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts on, you know? I know you don't want to get you can take this wherever you want to. 'Cause
In
I,
terms of how did I feel about, first of all,
when he
what
gave that speech, I know, he was. I'll say he was famous. I'll say he was famous president. You remember when he was killed?
yes, I do. Yeah, I do. We were all at school that day. hmm And nobody believed it. I couldn't believe it. Even when I saw the trailers, everybody who saw, because everything was live. We didn't have that. We don't have this tech. We didn't have that technology. AI. You go back and we scrub it and move some stuff around. It was live. And when you see her, Jackie, crawl up out of the back of that car, everybody was asking, why is she doing that? Why is it nobody ran up to the car and grabbed her and pushed her down in the seat to shield her? No, because she knew that the person in the front seat was killing her husband. So therefore, why would you want to be in the car? Not at all. The look on her face was sheer panic and shock and everything. She didn't really want to be married to Onassis, but he had power. And she needed protection for her and her children. That's why she married him and left America. So when Kennedy, because that was just part of his speech, him like Reagan, like Ford, they all brought that up, that secret societies cannot exist in America under a constitution and in a republic, because the masses of the people have to adhere to the rules of the republic. And they also said that we had violated all of the treaties we had with the indigenous people here. So if we're going to live by the Constitution, you cannot have things that are implied. Okay. And how do you imply it? You have a flag that's red, white, and blue with a gold fringe around it, which means you're under martial law. It means that every time you go in a courtroom, every time you go into a federal building, you're under martial law. So martial law left the sea and came on the land. The next place you saw it is with the Federal Reserve, which was never legally ratified. They created their own central bank, and you pay them to print money that has no value, pieces of paper that have no value. And then you allow the alcohol and tobacco and firearm people, which were basically ragtag groups, and they were deputized. And they thought that all they had to do was just go out and stop moonshine, okay? But they gave them the responsibility of collecting gold and silver from people who lived in the cities because the gold had value. Whatever the value was here in America, it was the same value in Africa, the same value in Europe, the same value in Asia. It does not fluctuate. So when they say gold was only 4,000, it's not that the value of gold has not changed. It's the value of your money. You need more money to equal that $4,000 because your money is now worth pennies. So you now need 4,000, 100,000 pieces of paper to get that same $4,000 worth of gold. So when Kennedy got to talking, and he pointed that out, that no society should have any secret anything, because we cannot stand when things are coming to you under the cover of darkness, which means your laws now under the cover of darkness.
For those that don't know, if you ever heard this speech, they said this speech is what got him killed. If you ever heard this speech and you listened to what he was saying, and you, as Sister Azina would say, if you understand what he's saying, this speech would actually send chills through because he knew. He
He knew.
knew some stuff. And like I said, a lot of people say that this speech got him killed. I have a question for you, Rodney.
Mm-hmm.
What year Martin came on the land?
9/11, 2011, 2001. You've been there since then.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, we had a conversation this week.
Mm-hmm.
We had a conversation when I talked to you yesterday,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
and you mentioned something to me, and now you just brought it up. Uh, I don't know if you realized you brought it up. So I
Go,
gotta ask.
go ahead, ask.
You mentioned something about this Bank of Delaware.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to explain how, when you're talking about these isms, how it coincides with our present politics and what happened during Jekyll Island all the way to the Bank of Delaware? What is the Bank of Delaware, first and foremost?
They're telling you it's the central bank of the United States of America, known as the Federal Reserve Bank. Look up the word federal. It's a derivative of the word feudal, which means controlled by a royal house. So the Bank of Delaware came on the end of the Jekyll Island group just before the 1913 collapse, so that they would have the ability to put funds in there to pay tribute to the Queen of England and to those members who were part of the Federal Reserve Board. They got money. Now, what does that mean for you? That means that when they removed gold and silver as a means of validating the dollar bill, the dollar bills, they went from being certificates, because they used to be called certificates. They were called um, gold certificates of tender and silver certificates of tender. And it would state on that bill that you could take that bill face value and receive gold or silver for the face value of that bill at any Federal Reserve Bank. Until that time, we had, remember we talked about the bills of lading, and then, this insurance company was doing this, and later on they became a banking industry, and you bought into it with your bills of lading or your gold and silver. You invested into it. And it wasn't considered a bank, it was considered a savings and loan, a trust, or a credit union. Okay. And so you were buying shares into that. They became very popular, especially among melanated skinned Black folks. Once we had our freedom and those that were already free, and we were buying land, we were creating our own monetary system. That went against what Jekyll Island wanted. They wanted to be sure several things. If slavery stayed where it was, that the indigenous people of this continent or this United States would be absolutely invisible and silenced, and that the wealthy patrilineal men would be in control because they would be the only ones that had the right to vote, and they would be the only ones that could decide any of the policies. Not one of them went to school for political science because it didn't exist. So, therefore, because they had that money, that wealth, that status, and many of them were very crooked. I want you to go back and read about Hershey. I love Hershey chocolate. Go back and read about Kellogg, Procter and Gamble.
Yourself, Hershey is beloved here.
I'm telling you, when you read about them and realize that they were doping the society with real coke, real opium. Okay, the Kellogg brothers, they fought among themselves badly, very badly, tried to kill each other. Okay, one brother was a doctor, the other was a lawyer. But I mean, the way they fought, Procter and Gamble, two separate people. Read about them. Okay, it's amazing. Go back and read the Bush family, how they ended up buying up Coca Cola and Seven Up, and that's recent. Go read about it.
So Sister Azima, I'm quite sure you um being that Delaware is the first state, you always hear a lot of people. I don't know if you guys in the chat own your own business. They'll always tell you to register your business in Delaware.
Or Nevada, and one other state. It's three states. Why? Because those states do not have taxes that impact you. There's only two types of taxes: import and export, or excise, as you say it. So if you are a business and you're exporting stuff, you're going to pay the tax on there. What's the tax for? It's the insurance that you need to make sure your product gets to its location. Okay, you're paying the mariner, the captain of the ship, to get your product there. Okay, same thing if he's bringing the product in. That's the same thing that you're doing now. Because it doesn't have that, what happens is that all of your business becomes sovereign. You know how they say we have to have transparency? Everybody doesn't need to know what you make. There is no law on the books that says a president has to tell you his salary or his income. There's no law on the books. They do it out of courtesy, okay? Because they're all part of that good old boys club. And being in that good old boys club, it's a one-upmanship. I got 10 billion. What you got? I should be president because I got 10 billion. Okay. So it's a good old boy type of system. And they have to all go to Bohemian Grove before they become president. That's a requirement. Now, going back to the Bank of Delaware, it also protects you from being seen by the Queen. Anything that's going on, what you're importing, what you're exporting, who you're selling it to once you get here, okay, in the United States, you can literally disperse your product everywhere. This was open land. You didn't have states, you had territories. And the only territory you really had was the 13 colonies. And they didn't go all the way down to Florida.
Even for the common person, if someone has their business in Delaware, you can't really even look into it. You can look, but if their business has a bunch of shell companies, you
Yes,
won't be able to crack the code, so to say. You won't be able to connect the dots. It will just leave you blank or leave you at the particular company that you're looking. You won't be able to say, well, just for an example, if me and Sister Azima owned Coca-Cola and we owed Pepsi
hmm
and we had a monopoly, so to say. If we had our business registered in Delaware, you would not be able to know that we had.
correct,
Would never
correct.
be able to find out. No one can find out. Like she said, you're hiding literally from the queen, other people's eyes.
hmm hmm
They can't even,
hmm
as we would say, do a forensic audit to
hmm
figure out what's what. They won't be able to do it.
You won't. You won't.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was a great way to benefit those who were escaping the policies of the Queen or any royal house. Okay, and that's where it was, and it was in Delaware because it was part of the 13 colonies, and the 13 colonies wanted to be sure that the Queen didn't overreach. Okay, but as you began to disperse out, how the Queen fixed that is that she said we're going to have places where we're going to create federal banks. Those federal banks will also be where you print money. She didn't say coin money, she said print money. So therefore, you started printing bills of lading. And most of it, at first they were just pink, green, and whatever. And then when you wanted to unify it, You put it all on white paper with black slaves on it. And the bigger the slave, the higher the denomination, the more pregnant the female, the greater the denomination. So, and then it went from that to greenbacks because you were the sharecroppers. It was still based on our labor. You're a sharecropper. So now we have greenbacks. And they fought tooth and nail, Congress did, and made sure that you would be able to exchange these pieces of paper for gold, silver, because most people were still being paid with gold and silver, or um, a good, strong commodity, sugar, salt. Okay. Then, when you're paying them in that, they needed a way to be sure that it was fair. That's where you got the tare scales, TARE scales.
Hmm.
And what they do with that scale is that, and those scales came from Kemet, is that you would put a weight on one side, a 5 pound weight or whatever. And then on the other side, you would adjust the scale to make sure it balanced so that when you put 5 pounds on there, you put 5 pounds of this or 5 pounds of that, it would balance out and you know, oh, that's a 5 pound scale. Okay. And so you know it as balancing both sides of the equation when you do geometry. You know, when they say you have to have zero on this side and zero on that side, you're balancing your equation out. Same thing with your tare weights. You're balancing out what you're putting on there so that when you do put 5 pounds on, you can determine that it is literally 5 pounds. Okay, so now when you started doing that type of thing, the isms came in because they needed to find a way to control all of the people who went on the gold rush moment, or they stumbled up on oil and gas because the queen wasn't making money off of that. So what do? You expand the territories and you put in the Bank of Philadelphia. Okay. The Bank of Pennsylvania, and it's in Philadelphia. And then you have the Bank of the Great Western Bank off of Pacific Coast Highway. It's either in the state of Washington or the state of Oregon. They print San Francisco. Sorry, it's in San Francisco, California, and they print money there. And then Missouri has two banks, two Federal Reserve banks, one in Kansas City and one in downtown St. Louis. And the bank in Kansas City takes care of all those states that touch Missouri on the west side of the United States. Okay, until you get to Nevada. But we take Colorado, South Dakota, North Dakota. Okay, then when you get to downtown St. Louis, it's all for the Southern Bank along Alabama, Arkansas, okay, Mississippi. That bank controls what goes on down there. So I think there's like, it used to be four, but I think now they have eight Federal Reserve banks. Okay, and that allowed them to begin to create agents. Okay, but the ism allowed them to be in control. You're going to control the mindset of the people. When the people rear their heads up against something, you send in the military to stump that down, and you make a big deal out of it. It's going to be on all the front pages of the newspaper. Okay. And you have to make sure you maintain that so you have the ability to be in control.
Mm.
So I was sorry when Kennedy got killed. I mean, I was just a kid, but we noticed that because we used to ask those questions in class. Why was she climbing out of the car? Why was she climbing out of the car? It
If
was a
anybody, if anybody ever got shot at, you would think you would be running for cover. Like Sister
right,
Azim said, she was
right,
never running for cover. She was trying to get the hell up out of there.
right, right. Because she knew who shot him. And it was just crazy. It was absolutely insane.
I'm trying to find.
Absolutely insane. Mhm. So with communism, which was supposed in its purest form, is communal community to benefit the community. Under the redacted form of it after Karl Marx and Frederick Engels, it became capitalism laced with fascism so that you can have control over what the people do, what they see, think. You know, you're even controlling what they eat. I mean, America controls what you eat. You have a standard American diet. Remove all the other letters, and SAD is what you have. SAD, the standard American diet. It's high in starch and acids, okay, and undigestible fibers. SAD. And you don't even realize you're eating that type of a diet because you have been conditioned through propaganda and programming to accept certain things. And that's what isms do, whether it's fascism, communism, Maoism, okay, that is what they do.
Might be able to find it.
What
I
the
actually, yeah, I actually have. Just
yeah,
got
it was very enlightening when he said that. Um, I don't remember the exact, but I remember paraphrasing where he said that you don't need secret societies. He brought the attention of the secret societies because his goal was to shut down the Internal Revenue Service.
Oh,
Okay. And to make sure that we were functioning under the Constitution for real and not just giving it lip service.
well, this
Which,
concludes
uh-huh.
another great conversation. Sister Azim, I just want to tell you, I really appreciate you. Always be willing to come on here and share wisdom and information with us. It has definitely been a pleasure that we all continue to benefit from your knowledge and wisdom. Do you have any final thoughts?
No.
Well, folks, that concludes our conversation, third part of our conversation. What is fascism? Ideology attack. Um, Part four will be very interesting, and I'm glad that she was able and allowed us how she correlated everything to today and understanding the isms and what goes on, and it's about control and being really being in a free society
Mhm.
for the people by the
Right.
people.
True.
With that, take care, and everybody have a great night.